We are continuing in learning a very interesting speech of the Rebbe that was so unique that it was put into a pamphlet. And it talks about the basic principles and the basic purpose and the uniqueness of Chassidut Chabad. Chabad, there's a lot of different groups of Chassidim. Chassidim in general, they branch off from the basic worldview of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov was Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem that lived about 300 years ago. And he came to put a new revival in, what do you want to call it, a rejuvenation, to bring out the Jew again in every Jew. Rejuvenation. And what does it mean? It means that there's a basic essence inside of every single Jew, a basic a point of being a Jew inside of every Jew, that this is precious for every Jew. But it becomes, spiritualized, vaporized, so that it's just sort of this memory and this general, wispy, nostalgic idea. And that a person says, oh yes, I'm a Jew, I remember my grandmother lit candles or something. Well, what is exactly this thing about being a Jew? What is it? So little by little, this idea gets sort of forgotten and de-emphasized. And the fact of the matter is that this point of being a Jew inside of a Jew is very, very, very dynamic. In other words, even more, this is the ability to improve and to bring the whole world, and to bring the whole world to function properly, the way it's supposed to function. To bring spiritual health and physical health to the whole entire world. Ideally, that's the idea of the Mashiach. The Mashiach is supposed to be a person, something like Adam, the first man, something like Moses, something like King David, that their whole purpose is just to be an example and also to bring the whole world to a recognition of who they really are, that everybody's being created by God all the time, and everyone has a certain purpose. All the non-Jews, they also have a certain uniqueness. Everyone is unique, and nobody is dispensable, and no one is replaceable. And everyone has this tremendous responsibility to themselves and to the world around them and to God, and to make the world a better place. But in order to reveal this, we have to reveal, first of all, the inner point of every Jew, the Judaism, the Jewishness of every Jew. What is this thing called a Jew? It's really quite amazing. And I don't know if I told you about it, but it's a long story about how I became an observant Jew. But the point of the whole story is, it happened almost 50 years ago, but the point of the story is that I heard a professor make I was in university, anyway, I heard a professor make an anti-Semitic statement. And it really sort of shocked me because I had no Jewish identity. I knew I was Jewish. I had a bar mitzvah, but I had no Jewish identity whatsoever. Like they say, what is your bar mitzvah? Was your graduation from Judaism. You graduate from high school, you don't go back. You graduate from Judaism, you're finished. And all of a sudden this professor, very well-known professor in America, he made an anti-Semitic statement, and it just really knocked me out. I figured, what has he got against Jews? What is a Jew? Why are they even worth mentioning, no less hating? They arouse emotions. I thought it wasn't worth anything, So I decided I was going to read the Torah. I read the English Bible, and I saw that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the basis of Judaism, they didn't do anything. They didn't do anything religious. They didn't do any customs, and they didn't do any rituals, and they didn't do any commandments, and they didn't, on the simple face value, they didn't do any miracles, they didn't talk about heaven, they didn't talk about hell. I couldn't figure out, what is this Judaism thing? Why do people hate them? Why do they continue being a Jew? What is there being a Jew? What is this that just hangs on? What is it? It's a very long story, but that was my big question. What's going on over here? What is this Judaism? And they're not promising any rewards, and God promised Abraham all sorts of things. He didn't give him, right? He didn't give your children are going to be like the stars of the sky, and he only had one son. God tells him to kill him. The whole thing makes no sense. Until it's a long story, like I said. But then somebody finally I found someone and they took me to the Rebbe. And I saw the Lubavitcher Rebbe, it was on Shabbos speaking, and I said, this is it. This is it. This is something really very alive, very good, and totally I don't understand what's going on over here. It's totally not a mystical experience. This is not an out of the world or heavenly, after death or whatever, after life experience. This is something really going on right now. This is something very unique and important. And I don't know what it is. And that's I start studying. Here it is. This is what is unique about. But now in Chabad, there are thousands and thousands of books that were written by the various Rebbes of Chabad on this subject, on very different aspects of the subject. And if I'm not mistaken, the last Rebbe, our Rebbe, he wrote more than any others. There was also the Tzemach Tzedek wrote, the third Rebbe of Chabad, who was also called Menachem Mendel, also wrote a lot. But
did the Rebbe actually write, or did he just speak and people wrote it down?
Most of it was that he spoke, they wrote it down, and they gave it to him. And he went over everything. And then he would give it back to them, and then they would correct it, and they would give it back to him again. That was called what's called a Sicha Muga. Muga means that the Rebbe went over it. He edited it, right? Okay, so now what is exactly this Chassidut thing? This Chassidut. First of all, let me just say in general, the ideas of Chabad Chassidut make use of all of the aspects of the Torah. They bring all sorts of proofs from the Torah, including mystical ideas, to make them practical in our day-to-day life. Of course, mystical ideas have to be used on sort of a different sort of plane, a different sort of a dimension, like loving God, for instance. That's a little bit different than putting on tefillin. But in order to love God, you have to know something about God. So let's see a little bit what is this idea of Chabad Hasidut, Chabad, and putting into your mind, into your idea and your understanding and your realization what God is, what He wants from us, what He wants from the world. How to come to loving God and fearing God and being practical about God, loving the Torah, loving the creation, loving every Jew, loving every moment of life, and accepting the challenge like Abraham did. How can we do it? And that's what this is going to be about. So let's just go just 1 minute before we said last time that there are 4 things that are said about Hasidut Chabad. I wanted to say there are a lot of movements of Hasidim from the Baal Shem Tov. A lot of movements of Hasidim and a lot of groups of Jews in general. There's a lot of groups. There's Gerer Hasidim and Belzer Hasidim and Satmar Hasidim and Vizhnitz Hasidim. And, all of them are wonderful people and they all have, wonderful ideas. And then there's groups of non-Hasidic groups. There's Slobodka and there's Panovich and there's... But the only one of all these groups that has 2 names is Lubavitch Hasidim. Lubavitch was the city that this Hasidus was centered around for most of its existence, over 100 years. And Chabad is the philosophy, if you want to call it, the worldview, the practical, dynamic worldview that we have. No other group has a thing like this. And Chabad believes that we have to educate the whole world with this. This is the work of the Mashiach, and that's what this book is about. Let's see. So we said that there's 4 things that people say about Hasidut, and we'll talk about that in a moment.